Well, Steve's
I'm
probably
in Allegan County.
Allegan County. Okay.
You're in Allegan? Okay.
Clyde, I'm going to turn it over to you. I know you sent out, well, first of all, the minutes from the last meeting. Can I entertain a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All right. Any changes? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
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 Okay. And next item of business is the letter sent to us by Clyde. I'm going to turn it over to Clyde.
Thank you. This is a letter, and Mr. Saladicki is here. Also, Bobby Durkee. Hopefully it was a little, and I'm going to ask for some explanation from those two because it's a little unclear exactly what it is that is going to be put in place. This is, as I understand it, a request for either a license or an easement over land that's owned by the building authority to accommodate parking that would not be public parking, but would be private parking. And it's not clear to me whether those parking, as I understand it, the zoning code requires them to be 12 feet wide, but the diagram I saw would be 4 9-foot wide parking spots. None of them are for handicap. These are for able-bodied drivers. And if we're talking about 36 feet, that would mean 3 parking spots as opposed to 4. But I'm going to let Bobby speak to it first, and then Mr. Saladicki can chime in.
The request was, I had spoken to Steve some months ago. They were interested in adding 4 parking spaces to 103 East Michigan Avenue, which is the MavCon buildings over there. And when reviewing any paving or parking space in the city, there's a paving permit application. And reviewing it, essentially the north line of this parcel backs up to the building authority property. So the comparison I used with Steve was, if I was the property owner, it would be, an agreement, at least some sort of acknowledgement if this was an application from the neighboring owner to have permission to back or access the spaces through their property, because the zoning ordinance for a parking space states that it must be accessible to a public right-of-way, easement, or point of access. And the Kalamazoo Municipal Building Authority and the alleys that run through there, based off of the surface occupation, it isn't apparent. So to ensure that at least it was, an acknowledgement was known that these parking spaces, in order to get to them, it had to cross the Kalamazoo Building Authority property. That's where I advised Steve to reach out and receive a formal building authority approval. And I don't know if it's helpful for me to do a screen share and show the overview. And in regards to the 12-foot, the 12-foot was in reference to the drive lane that the vehicles would back into. And there's about 17 feet that I see. So they meet the typical requirements of what we would look at inside of a parking lot. And then once they're through there, they would go in, the exit through the gate, which would be near the public alley within the lot. So there's no way to get to these spaces without at least crossing through there, where acknowledging it's a little unique because it's all quasi-public anyway. So to ensure that there wasn't some misunderstanding between the parties, I advised Steve to get a formal building authority approval. And overall, the design, everything about it is compliant with the ordinance. And then adding the easement agreements that were established about 10 years ago, at least an acknowledgement, in my opinion, that it's still accessible. The former alley that used to be through there, there's easements to access a utility box or for the public. And I think with the parking spaces or the sidewalk in place, that is still possible. So at the end of the day, it comes down to, is there permission to access this? Because it's coming across for lack of a better term, private, but essentially public parcel. Instead of a public deeded right-of-way, it's a parcel of land. I believe 121 East Water Street is the address.
And do I understand correctly that there's certain curb and pavement and light going to be removed, but that's on private property, that's going to be changed?
Yes, the current work associated with the 180 East Water project, where the Kalamazoo Promise will be moving into, All of that parking lot was redone in the fall, and the scope of that work did not encroach onto 103 East Michigan. So all of this would be, on the private property. And I guess, Steve, to be completely transparent, I don't know if there's a little spillover at the connection, but I don't believe so. I think there might be a little spillover it might be right on the line currently. So in a sense, the whole access is still connected to the building authority property.
Does Mr. Salatiki want to?
Yeah, I'm happy to,
Anything?
to weigh in. I mean, I think Bobby laid it out better than I would have, but the substance of it, I think, is there. But I have to first say, in 18 years of practicing law, I've never had anybody pronounce my last name correctly. And Mr. Robertson and Mr. Ritzma just both did it. So this is like, I need to buy a lottery ticket today. I can't believe it. So I appreciate that. But yeah, I think, Bobby, you laid out the issues were, two of the three issues are just the fact that we're kind of backing into the parking lot that's owned, as Bobby described, kind of quasi-public, but we need to get through that parking lot to get out to the public right of way. So that makes this a little bit unique. And then the third issue would be the easement. When my clients bought the Metropolitan Center, they had to take ownership of Whiskey Alley there in order to do some restoration work on the backside of the building. And as part of that deed, we included deed restrictions that essentially operate like easements to allow for pedestrian access through there. And so we'd want to make sure that pedestrians can still get through there. And, if as Bobby, if he wants to screen share or if that's necessary, but we're not impeding pedestrian access. And then it's also maintenance access for you. There's some utilities there. And again, we don't think the parking spaces or the proposed parking spaces would inhibit that either. So that's the easement. And then the other two issues are really just, can we cut across your property to get to the street?
If this were a private parcel, a written acknowledgement from the owner would typically satisfy the requirement.
Okay.
Well, I guess that's the question I have. Do we need a formal easement? I didn't get that in looking at the warranty deed that was executed back in, was it 2009? That necessarily carries the day. That it seems to me that, or I guess it's 2010, that we need, or perhaps we should have an easement agreement that permits access across the building authority property.
Right. Yeah. There's nothing in existence. You're right. That would give access to those units across that property. Are there any other, Bobby? Do you know? Are there any other spaces within the lot that are actually on private property that are similarly configured like this?
I don't know. I don't believe so. I'm pretty confident no. The only part that is publicly accessible would be where the A1 printing building is and the Chase Bank. It's sort of an upside down T-shaped right of way. So it's used as a loading zone, but technically it's all part of alley right of way in that decision.
And then what about the new Lot 9 development? Will that have an easement through the building authority property to get out to the road?
That is a separate parcel. The layout of the configuration where the CD12 building is on one parcel, and then there's two parcels of building authority that are parking lot. So that development itself is on its own parcel.
And it has direct access off to the right of way, so it doesn't need to come through the building authority space. Okay. I think the answer then is probably yes, that we would need a simple easement over the building authority property to get in and out from those spaces. Right,
Okay.
Bobby? Am I missing something?
An easement would be a little more solid of a record than, say, a written acknowledgement. An easement would be the best.
I would agree with that. I guess the other question is, are the parking spaces intended for public use, or are these parking spaces going to be used by employees?
It's both, and actually James Daly, the owner of Metropolitan Center, is he got caught in between meetings and he's on the road and having trouble dialing in, but he's been texting me to help provide some input, and I was asking him that question, and he said it will be for public parking. It's possible that it could be used by those business tenants, their tenant customers. He said it would be designated just like the parking lot is now, so it would be used for mostly tenant customer traffic. So somebody that's going to Subway, for example.
Oh, so you anticipate, well, I guess that's my question. If it's public parking and it's on private property, I guess the question becomes, are you going to try to limit it by signage or something so it reserves only for those members of the public that are accessing your clients' buildings? Or what happens if you get somebody who says, oh, I really need a parking spot, there's open one there, but I'm not going to be going into that, using that parking spot to access this particular business?
Yeah, I think that would be the idea, is to put a sign up to say, for use by Metropolitan Center customers or something like that. I can confirm that. In fact, maybe I'll, while we're chatting, try to get that answer directly, but that would be my expectation.
I can see where that could become problematic if you got these 4 spaces adjacent to what is otherwise a public parking lot that anybody can park anywhere, unless you've got, I don't know if there's reserve signs there for people who are acquiring the property on a monthly basis, for instance.
I think we have that. And I think there's also KVCC exclusive spaces as well.
Okay.
In that lot, I think. Am I right about that, Bobby?
Yeah, I haven't been out there since they finalized the paving. I don't know off the top of my head.
Yeah, there used to, I haven't been out there in a little while either. There used to be some signage like that. I'm not sure if it's still there.
And largely the work done there was, scraping the top, essentially. I don't believe there was a full tear out of the existing parking lot.
So I have a couple of questions. First of all, the access to those spaces, what would happen if down the road we wanted to develop that property, the building authority owned property on 128 East Water Street? What would happen with the easement, or could we develop on that if that easement is in place?
An easement in place would be viewed through a development. We wouldn't permit someone to put a structure and impede it at the time of development. So it would be viewed almost like a roadway on the property.
Okay, so that we would be able to develop it. We just have to ensure that we're fulfilling the easement.
Well, and that calls into question, what type of document do we want to use? I mean, if we have an easement does confer property rights. We become the subservient property owner to the rights of the party that's got the easement. On the other hand, we could enter into either a lease that would be for a period of years, or we could enter into a revocable license that you have a license to operate, to go across our land, but the license, if we get a development agreement, we can, with adequate notice, end the license agreement, and you don't get it. Because you haven't granted a property right. You can just say, you got 30 days and you're done. We're going to be developing this parcel, and you won't have at least vehicular access to this portion of your property any longer.
I think from our perspective, obviously, having something with some permanence would be our preference, but we'd be pretty agnostic as to what that looks like. I wouldn't expect the easement would give us a specific path that we're permitted to drive out. It would be, we're agnostic as to where. We just need to somehow have access out to Water Street, to the public right of way. But the next best thing after that would be, I think, the license agreement that Mr. Robinson identified.
Okay.
Yeah, I would envision in regard to an easement, it would be kind of general in terms of a general right to cross our property to access these 4 spots. The question becomes, and I think Jim, you raise a good one. I don't want to necessarily grant a property right for all time that all of a sudden precludes the ability for the city, if the situation comes down the road, to develop this property because we've got an easement across it. And then we have to, if you will, at worst, probably condemn the easement and have to pay the easement holder in order to develop that property. Because we're acquiring the easement, we're destroying it.
So the license would be a better,
A license
There you
is right. We can enter into a revocable license.
okay.
And
Yeah,
that would require notice of some kind. I mean, I would envision we were looking at something like a 60, 90, 120 day notice that
Right.
we would revoke that ability.
Yeah, I mean, I think that probably does make more sense, to be honest. I mean, that I think we wouldn't have the intention of wanting to stop a development by the city if something were to happen back there. That would only benefit and increase the value of the Metro Center. So I think we'd be comfortable with a revocable license as long as there was some reasonable notice where we could figure out alternative routes to the parking spaces or close them down.
Okay. So my second question is going back to the piece about the width of the parking spaces. Is that a concern that we need to address here, or is that just making us aware that they're not conforming to whatever the specs are for public parking?
No, as I understand Bobby's explanation, the parking spaces are in accord. He just, you need a 12-foot space in order to access it, in order to turn into them or and the
Oh,
like.
gotcha.
And
Okay.
I think Bobby's explanation is that there appears to be sufficient space for that.
Okay. I misunderstood that. Okay, good. So, so what action, if any, do we need to take today?
Well,
But-
we don't have a license agreement in front of us to approve. What I suggest we might want to do is authorize the city attorney to enter into negotiations to create a revocable license. And then once Mr. Slaticky and I have agreed upon the document, then you as the chair of the building authority be authorized to execute it. So it's just kind of a general direction. Go forth, draft a revocable license, and when the parties agree, bring it back and we'll execute it. So I would move that.
Okay. Is there support?
Or
So Clyde, would that have to go before the city commission, or is this all handled at the building authority level?
I think it's all handled at the building authority because it's our property.
Okay, good. All right, any other discussion? All right, we got a motion to whatever Clyde said. He's got the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Well, very good. I don't know that there are any public, I guess, are there any public comments?
There are no public comments at this time.
All right, thank you. All right, member comments? All
None.
right. Well, yeah, Clyde?
No, I have none.
Okay. All right, well, thank you all, and glad this worked out.
Yeah, thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
Before we adjourn, I guess I would ask Steve Slaticky, what is your time frame? I know you really wanted to get this in front of the building authority sooner rather than later. What is the time frame you're looking at to kind of get a legal document together?
Yeah, I think the framework for James and the Metropolitan Center was to try to do this work while the parking lot work is happening for the other development. And so, there, as soon as we can reasonably craft something together, I'm happy to, if you've got a template you've used that you'd like me to work from, I'm happy to create a first draft if that helps move it along. But I think if we could have, I don't know, what's reasonable, end of next week or something for a document.
Give me more like 10 days. I'd appreciate that.
Great.
Into the next week a little bit. And if you want to take a run at it, I'd appreciate that. And so I'll take a look and do a little bit of research on my end.
Great. Yeah, happy to do that.
Okay, appreciate it.
Great.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
All right.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you. We
Bye.
are adjourned.